welcome and thank you for joining us. This is going to be a sincere treat, and we're excited for this. Welcome to Up Close and Personal with Dr. John Berardi. We appreciate your time.
First of all, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I've actually wanted to come on a interview like this for a while with you guys. Ever since we've done some work together previously in the last couple of years. So yeah, I really appreciate you having me on. And
this particular Up Close and Personal, we're going to be looking at things that are related to nutrition and nutrient biochemistry, which is a little bit different than the typical traditional thing that we go through in personal training. We're always about movement. We're about loads and forces and different things. And this is a little different force. It's a very powerful and important force for us. So, John, if it's okay with you, we're going to start going through some of the topics. And for those of you, this is going to be a little bit of a mini-series. We're going to have two different topics. And the first topic that we're going to hit on in this particular segment is going to be called food and mood, and how food can impact our mood and our behaviors. We hear a lot about how food can impact our moods, but in essence, how true is that? And how can food really change how we feel?
In general, the area of food, if you want to call it nutrition, and fitness, I think is sort of, I don't know, people understand its importance. And in the fitness industry, we have this gut feeling that it could really make a difference. But we're not quite sure how much of a difference it's going to make and how to do it. And that's actually been a mission of mine for the last few years with, the certification program you're talking about, which I'm honored to have you guys going through. It's how can we actually teach, not just, here is a carbohydrate and this is what it does to the body, but within the context of an actual client's life or our own lives for that matter, how can we teach someone to eat better? And what does it mean to them? That's a really critical part for me. So when it comes to this particular issue, food and mood, traditionally it was just kind of thought that there was this emotion and food connection, but it was really, really simple. We just overeat when we're stressed out or we're depressed. And I think that's oversimplification, in fact, because research now shows that there are actually deeper, more meaningful connections between food and mood, and we actually are starting to understand the physiology. There are three main mechanisms now that we think food impacts our mood, or nutrients impact our mood. The first is that food helps the brain make these mood-changing chemicals called neurotransmitters. So the nutrients that are in our food can travel through our bloodstream to our brain and help us make certain things, within our body, and hormones and things like that. But the hormones of the brain, those are neurotransmitters, and those are the things that make us feel certain ways. So that's the first thing. The second thing is food impacts our blood sugar, which most of us know, and that impacts our perceptions of alertness and energy. So a lot of people think, when you eat carbs, for example, you get energy. And it's not actually true in the same sense that most people think. Carbs aren't necessarily energy. But what they do is that they increase our blood sugar levels, and our blood sugar is what makes us feel alert and active and able to do things. So that's where carbs can impact our ability to feel energy. But other nutrients can too. And in some cases, carbs can actually make us feel less energetic if we do things wrong, which we'll probably talk about as this interview goes forward. So that's the second. Food impacts our blood sugar, and that impacts our perceived energy. And finally, food is connected, and this is a bit more sort of emotional, is connected with past feelings and experiences. Now, some of us think that's kind of like woo-woo stuff, but really there's actually pathways in the brain where you can look using, functional MRI or, other techniques, and you can see that certain areas will light up when people see a food or smell a food, and that's because we've actually trapped memories and feelings and emotions, and we've attached them to those smells and those sights. And that is a powerful impact. It sort of impacts, how we'll feel when we see and smell a food, how we'll feel when we eat a food, and it's completely unrelated to things like how much nutrition it provides. So right now we know that there's these three main mechanisms. So let's just talk about some examples. One example would be people who get tired in the middle of the afternoon. Okay, it's many of us. So what happens then? What should you do? What kind of food should you eat, or what can impact that mid-afternoon lull? Well, at that time, a high-protein snack is really, really useful. So why does that work? Well, protein, and certain proteins higher than others, are high in an amino acid called tyrosine. And tyrosine stimulates the release of two neurotransmitters, dopamine and epinephrine. So this gives us, these two neurotransmitters gives us energy and alertness without any caffeine required. So right there we have our first food-mood connection. Feeling low, high-protein snack can give us a boost. Now let's look at another macronutrient, carbohydrate. So carbs, when we eat carbs, they actually release a different neurotransmitter, serotonin. And the neurotransmitter serotonin puts us to sleep. So we want to make sure that with our high-protein snack, we don't eat too many carbs in the middle of the afternoon if we're feeling kind of tired already. Now, a lot of people from there will say, well, those carbs, they put us to sleep, and maybe I should eat them at night, but during the day I should never eat them. And that's not necessarily true, because although they can make us a little sleepy, this release of serotonin that comes with carbs also does some wonderful things like alleviate depression, calm the nerves, reduce the appetite, and help reduce physical pain even. So a meal that's high in, let's say, good carbs or complex carbs can actually help with a host of other things, although it might make you a little sleepier. So again, we can see the power of food and how it can impact how we feel. Let's stay with the carb theme and talk about sugar just real briefly. Well, this is the blood sugar connection. If we eat just sugar or high sugar food, our blood sugar rises, we all know that, and we feel energy for a short period of time. But then insulin is released, a hormone, and it clears out our blood of that sugar, puts it in fat and muscle cells, and then we have an energy crash. So we can see the connection again. When that energy crashes, even though we ate carbs, we're going to feel unenergetic. So again, it's food and mood. And we all know what happens when our blood sugar crashes. We get cranky, we get irritable, we get short-tempered with people. Road rage happens and a host of other things. Just think about the last time you had road rage. And it was usually a few hours after you ate. Your blood sugar was probably low at that point, and you were just too irritable to deal with life. And that's a problem we can remedy. And it's just by simply balancing our blood sugar. So again, food and mood. Protein, on the other hand, actually negates this. Protein helps us to balance blood sugar. So you can prevent those crashes. You can keep blood sugar more even-keeled so it never spikes and then it never crashes down. One more example that I found really meaningful and a lot of people aren't even aware of. Let's say you're starting out a new exercise program and you're not a habitual exerciser. So usually we find that people in this stage are lagging in motivation. Well, one thing to do at that point is to take omega-3 rich fish oils. Now, I'm not talking about flaxseed oil here. I'm talking about the EPA DHA rich fish oil. And why would we want to take that? Well, fish oil actually increases dopamine, or actually influences the dopamine and the serotonin systems in the brain. So again, neurotransmitter systems, and it leads to a lower incidence of depression, but also increased motivation. So it's very, very fascinating to think that when, let's say you want to start a new behavior, a new habit, let's say exercise is that habit, maybe it's something else. Maybe you want to learn to play the piano or learn to speak a foreign language. But motivation is an issue. Well, fish oil can actually help boost motivation in these cases. And in our coaching programs, it's the first habit we have people start with. We have them start with a specific dose of fish oil designed to help them kickstart fat loss and increase metabolism while also impacting mood. So it's increasing motivation. So again, I'm going to wrap it there because I could really keep going on this. But hopefully you get an appreciation of how important food is in the mood process and how it can really influence not only the way we feel, but maybe even link with some of our behaviors.
We went through protein, carbohydrates, and then even into the fats, and the fats being more specific to the fish oil with motivation. Is it safe to say in that lull period, or if people are hitting that lull period, would some type of balanced kind of carbohydrate, a right carbohydrate and a good source of protein at that time, would that kind of help with a couple of those confounding variables?
Potentially, absolutely. And you know what, balance means different things to different people. Usually people's goals aren't just, let's say, to have a good afternoon that isn't sleepy. They may also want to gain muscle, lose fat, and a host of other things. So the considerations with respect to that, you'd have to put the program together based on what their other goals are. For example, if someone's goals are sort of weight maintenance or just eating a healthy diet and feeling great, you know, then where you're talking about balance is really important. So you might have something like, one carbohydrate for every one protein in that meal or something like that. Just making sure that the carbs are the slower digesting, healthier variety so you don't have the blood sugar spikes. Now, if you're someone who is trying to actively lose weight, for example, or lose body fat, in that case, you might actually be eating fewer carbohydrates in your diet. So there, the higher protein and maybe balance out with vegetables and good fats would be important. And we found this time and time again, even on low calorie diets and low carb diets, when they're low calorie and low carb, we can watch blood sugar become amazingly balanced even without eating much carbohydrate, which is kind of a fascinating thing. At first, doctors, when they were measuring this, and scientists were like, what the heck's going on? These people aren't even eating much carbs. Mm-hmm. And the reason is our body has these mechanisms for creating carbs from whatever we eat and balancing out blood sugar. And the biggest roller coaster ride for blood sugar is eating too many carbs in the diet. Mm-hmm. So we always have to balance out all these other considerations, weight loss, performance goals, and mood goals, or how to feel good.
John, do you have, when you talk about protein and like a high protein snack, real quick, do you have a couple of things? Are you talking about complete proteins? Is that important for people to understand, the complete protein versus non-complete protein, or what's your thought around that?
I like the idea of consuming complete proteins when you can, or as often as you can throughout the day. There's some data showing that this is in animal models, in a pig model, for example, that when you give pigs feed throughout the day that doesn't have any complete protein, they actually leach protein or amino acids out of their muscles, because there seems to be this stat, like an amino acid stat, like a thermostat, but for amino acids in your brain. So when it perceives a meal coming in that's deficient in certain amino acids, it tries to find those other amino acids somehow, so it may take them right from your muscles. So then the brain says, okay, we're cool. We've got all the essential amino acids here. We can work. The problem was you actually are just redistributing. You're just bringing them through the body and then sticking them back in some way. But what happens to get them out is you create a catabolic state. So cortisol goes up and a host of other things. So my goal typically is to find complete amino acid sources with each meal. What does that mean? I mean, that could be some lean meat, some fish, some chicken. That could be a scoop of protein powder. It could be a low-carb protein bar. It could be vegetarian sources like legumes, tofu, things like that, soy-based products. So it really doesn't matter. I'm not pro-meat here or pro-vegetarian here. Well, whatever protein source, but the key is just, it has these effects, so we should be aware of them, and we should feed protein regularly.